Emma's high school graduation party was supposed to be perfect. I'd spent weeks planning it, coordinating with her friends' parents, booking the country club, ordering the custom cake with her college logo. What I didn't plan for was my ex-husband David's new wife deciding to give everyone a speech about my inadequacies as a mother. The party was in full swing when it happened. 43 people scattered across the club's terrace, parents mixing with teenagers, everyone celebrating Emma's acceptance to Northwestern. I was standing near the dessert table, watching my daughter laugh with her friends, feeling genuinely proud of how well she'd turned out despite the divorce chaos 3 years ago. That's when I heard Tiffany's voice cutting through the conversation like nails on a chalkboard. "Oh, Emma, sweetie, come here for a second." Emma walked over to where Tiffany stood with a small group of parents, her blonde hair perfectly styled, wearing a dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly rent. David stood beside her, looking uncomfortable, but not uncomfortable enough to stop what was coming. "I just wanted to tell everyone how proud David and I are of Emma," Tiffany announced loudly enough for half the party to hear. "It's so wonderful to see her thriving now that she has stability at home." A few parents nodded politely, not quite sure where this was going. I felt my stomach tighten. "You know," Tiffany continued, placing her hand on Emma's shoulder, "when David and I got together, Emma was going through such a difficult time. Her grades were slipping, she seemed so anxious all the time. But now look at her. Valedictorian, full scholarship, headed to one of the best universities in the country." She paused dramatically, making sure she had everyone's attention. "Don't worry, honey," she said directly to Emma, but loud enough for everyone to hear. "Your mom was just the failed first draft. Sometimes it takes a few tries to get the family right." The silence that followed was deafening. I watched Emma's face crumble, watched her friends' parents exchange horrified glances, watched David finally find his spine and whisper something urgent in Tiffany's ear. But the damage was done. 43 people had just heard my daughter's stepmother call me a failed first draft at my own daughter's graduation party. Emma looked across the terrace at me, her eyes filling with tears. I wanted to march over there and say something that would put Tiffany in her place, but this was Emma's day. Instead, I smiled at my daughter, gave her a small nod that said, "I'm okay," and watched her excuse herself to the bathroom. I followed her a few minutes later and found her crying in the ladies' room. "Mom, I'm so sorry," she sobbed. I can't believe she said that. I wanted to tell her to shut up, but... "Hey," I said, pulling her into a hug. "This is your graduation party. Don't let anyone ruin that for you. We'll deal with this later. But it's not fair. You're the one who helped me with my college applications. You're the one who drove me to all my interviews. You're the one who..." "I know, sweetheart. And you know, that's what matters." We fixed her makeup and went back to the party. I made sure to stay on the opposite side of the terrace from David and Tiffany, but I could feel people watching me, whispering, wondering how I was handling the public humiliation. The party ended 2 hours later. Parents hugged Emma, congratulated her again, and carefully avoided making eye contact with me. David approached as I was gathering my purse. "Victoria, about what Tiffany said. Save it, David. Today was about Emma. Let's keep it that way." He looked relieved that I wasn't making a scene. She didn't mean it the way it sounded. She meant exactly how it sounded. But like I said, not today. I drove home to my small condo, the place I'd moved to after David asked for the divorce. It was cozy, modern, everything the opposite of the sprawling house where we'd raised Emma. The house where David now lived with Tiffany and her twin boys from her first marriage. That night, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine and really thought about Tiffany's words for the first time. Failed first draft. The implication being that she was the successful final version, the upgrade, the woman who'd fixed everything I'd apparently broken. It was interesting logic, considering she'd never had to deal with Emma's terrible twos, her middle school anxiety, the sleepless nights when she was sick, the homework battles, the friend drama, the college stress. Tiffany had walked into Emma's life when she was 15 and relatively easy, then took credit for the foundation I'd spent 16 years building. But what really bothered me wasn't the insult itself. It was the audience. Emma's friends' parents, people I'd known for years, people who'd seen me at every soccer game, every school play, every parent-teacher conference. Now they'd all go home with this story about David's bitter ex-wife and his successful new marriage. The next morning, I did something I hadn't done in 3 years. I called my lawyer. "Victoria, this is unexpected. How are you?" "I'm fine, Margaret. I need to ask you something about the divorce settlement." Of course. What's on your mind? The house. The one David lives in now. Just to confirm, I still own it, correct? A pause. Yes, that's correct. You kept the house in the settlement, but you allowed David to continue living there until Emma graduated high school. The agreement was that he'd handle the mortgage payments and maintenance in lieu of rent. And Emma graduated yesterday. Ah, so the arrangement terminates. Are you thinking of moving back in? Actually, I'm thinking of selling it. Another pause, longer this time. That's certainly your right. Though I should mention, you'll need to give David 30 days notice to vacate. It's in the agreement. Send him the notice today. Victoria, are you sure? This seems sudden. Did something happen? I told her about the graduation party, about the failed first draft comment, about standing there watching my daughter's face while 43 people heard her stepmother dismiss me. Well, Margaret said when I finished, that certainly explains the timing. I'll draft the notice this afternoon. The notice was delivered on Wednesday morning. David called me within an hour. Victoria, what the hell is this? A notice to vacate? You can't be serious. I'm completely serious. But where are we supposed to go? Tiffany's boys are settled in their schools. Emma will be home for breaks. This is insane. You'll figure it out. You're adults. This is about what Tiffany said at the party, isn't it? Look, she apologized to Emma. She feels terrible about it. Does she? Because she hasn't apologized to me. She will. She was just nervous. You know how these social situations are for her. I almost laughed. Social situations were difficult for the woman who'd had no problem announcing to 43 people that I was a failed first draft. David, the house is mine. I've let you live there for 3 years rent-free while paying your daughter's stepmother pretend she's her real mother. That arrangement is over. You can't do this to the kids. Tiffany's boys have been through enough with their parents' divorce. Then maybe Tiffany should have thought about that before she decided to humiliate me in public. He hung up. An hour later, my phone rang again. This time it was Tiffany. Victoria? It's Tiffany. I think there's been a misunderstanding. Really? What kind of misunderstanding? About the house. David said you're trying to kick us out, but that can't be right. We've been living here for 3 years. We've made improvements, we've maintained everything. Surely there's some sort of tenant protection. You're not tenants, Tiffany. You're guests. Guests who have overstayed their welcome. But I don't understand. If David doesn't own the house, then who's been paying the mortgage all this time? There is no mortgage. I paid it off 5 years ago. Silence. Long, stretching silence. You what? I paid off the mortgage in 2019. David's been living in my house, mortgage-free, for 3 years. But he told me he owned the house. He said you got the condo in the divorce settlement. I got the condo in the house. I chose to live in the condo and let him stay in the house until Emma graduated. Which she did. Yesterday. More silence. I could practically hear her recalculating everything she thought she knew about the divorce, about David's finances, about who had what kind of power in this situation. This is ridiculous, she said finally. You can't just throw us out on the street. We have rights. Actually, you don't. But you have 30 days to find somewhere else to live. Emma will never forgive you for this. Emma doesn't know yet. When I tell her, I'll make sure to explain that her stepmother called me a failed first draft in front of 43 people, and that actions have consequences. She hung up. The next 3 weeks were fascinating to watch from a distance. David called repeatedly, alternating between anger and desperation. Tiffany tried a different approach, suddenly wanting to have lunch, to talk things through, to clear the air. I declined all invitations. Emma, meanwhile, was confused but supportive when I finally explained the situation. Wait, you own their house? You've owned it this whole time. I've owned it since before you were born. Your father and I bought it together, and I kept it in the divorce. But why didn't you move back in? It's so much bigger than your condo. Because I wanted you to have stability. I didn't want you to have to change schools or leave your friends. So I found a place nearby and let your father stay in the house. And now they have to move out? Now they have to move out. Emma was quiet for a moment. Is this because of what Tiffany said at my party? Partly. But also because the arrangement was always temporary. You've graduated. It's time. Good, she said firmly. What she said was horrible. I'm glad you're not letting them walk all over you anymore. On day 29, David showed up at my condo. Victoria, please. We found a place, but we need more time. The lease doesn't start until next month. Can't you give us 2 more weeks? No. Tiffany's been crying for days. The boys are confused. They don't understand why they have to leave their home. It was never their home, David. It was mine. Fine, it's your house. But we're family. Doesn't that count for something? I looked at him standing on my doorstep, the man I'd been married to for 18 years, the father of my daughter, and felt absolutely nothing. When Tiffany called me a failed first draft in front of 43 people, did you think about family then? She made a mistake. People say stupid things when they're nervous. She wasn't nervous, David. She was cruel. And you let her be cruel to the mother of your child at your child's graduation party. So this is revenge? No, this is property management. I own a house. I want to sell it. The current occupants need to leave. And if we don't, then I'll call the sheriff, and you'll leave anyway. But with a lot less dignity. They moved out the next day. I drove by the house that evening and saw a moving truck in the driveway, boxes stacked on the front porch, Tiffany directing the movers while looking like she'd been crying for a week. David saw my car and walked over. Are you happy now? He asked. I'm satisfied, I said. There's a difference. Tiffany wants to apologize. She knows she was wrong. 3 weeks too late. So what happens now? You move back in. Actually, I've decided to sell it. The realtor thinks it'll go fast in this market, especially with all the improvements you and Tiffany made. His face went pale. You're selling it? But what about Emma? What about her childhood home? Emma's going to college, David. She doesn't need a childhood home anymore. She needs a college fund. I drove away before he could respond. The house sold in 6 days. Cash offer, no contingencies, $15,000 over asking price. The new owners were a young family with twin toddlers who fell in love with the backyard playground David had installed for Tiffany's boys. Emma helped me pack up her remaining belongings from her old room. Are you sad? She asked, looking around at the empty space where she'd grown up. No, I said honestly. Houses are just buildings. Home is where the people who love you are. And Tiffany called you the failed first draft, Emma said, shaking her head. If you're a failed first draft, what does that make me? The masterpiece, I said, and meant it. The closing was on a Tuesday. I deposited the check that afternoon and immediately transferred half of it to Emma's college fund. The other half went into my retirement account. That evening, Tiffany called one last time. I heard you sold the house. I did. I just want you to know that I really am sorry about what I said at the graduation party. I was wrong. Yes, you were. I hope someday you can forgive me. I already have, Tiffany. But forgiveness doesn't mean forgetting. And it doesn't mean there aren't consequences. 43 people, she said quietly. What? 43 people heard me call you a failed first draft. I've been thinking about that. About how humiliated you must have felt. And now you know how it feels to lose your home in front of an audience, I said. Funny how that works out. After I hung up, I sat on my couch with a glass of wine, looking at my bank statements, thinking about failed first drafts and final versions and the difference between the two. A failed first draft gets thrown away. The final version gets published. And sometimes, the woman everyone underestimated turns out to own the whole damn printing press.